Hello. Well, this seems to be recording. The big story is my computer died on me, and so I am recording this on an iPad propped up against a pencil bucket thing, and I'm not too sure about its stability. But I wanted to talk about two videos I've seen recently, and one of them, the most disappointing one really, was one by Black Pigeon Speaks, which is supposed to be a discussion about whether women should or should not have the vote. It's supposed to be a discussion on that. Actually, it's just a rant that women don't deserve the vote because they're stupid and destructive or something. Anyway, I was disappointed with Black Pigeon because normally up to now I've regarded him as a very level-headed, clear viewer of the world, but not in this case. It's like he just lost control. And the worst was the comments underneath. It seemed to attract a certain sort of comment, which I found very discomforting. And then Sargon did another video called Femininity So Fragile, about this app that came out which purports to remove makeup from film stars and models and that sort of thing. Actually, it doesn't remove the makeup, it just dulls some of the lines and it introduces some blotchiness into the skin. And there's some woman talking about it and manages to twist the whole thing round into something about white supremacy. I don't remember. I mean, she was talking total bollocks. She was a complete idiot. But again, the stuff underneath was very disturbing. And it was all to do with the fact, we shouldn't never have given women the vote because they're too stupid. And in the case of the Sargon thing, too Jewish, which was a bit disturbing as well. I am not, by the way, saying that Sargon should thereby censor the people making the comments. They should make the comments. It just lets you know what sort of people they are. But we have to remember that universal suffrage is by no means the sort of system that these guys seem to think it is. That is, they appear to think that all men could vote and then women got the vote and everything went arse over tit. No, it didn't. Men didn't have the vote until comparatively recently, and a huge majority of men did not have the vote until about the same time as women had the vote in around 1918. The first big push for suffrage was a parliamentary discussion in 1866, which resulted in 1867 in the Second Reform Act. Now, that gave the vote to householders, ratepayers, people who paid rates, but it completely excluded people who rented, for instance, because they didn't pay, they weren't property holders. And the fact is that in the 19th century, most people rented. Hardly anyone owned a house. And if you look through Victorian novels, you'll see mention of people renting and moving. It was a far less settled and far more fluid society than we now think. So the 1867 gave the vote to property owners who paid rates. This situation only applied to people in the towns. In the country, these same people couldn't vote until, let's see, 1884. So that was the Third Reform Act. And as I said, very few people actually owned their own homes at that time. Non-householders, that is, people who just paid rent, were unable to vote until 1918. And as a matter of fact, what drove that was the fact that the soldiers who lived in barracks could not vote which was considered terribly unfair, and quite rightly. So in 1918, any man who was not a criminal, any man over 21, could vote, what they called respectable working people. Working men, rather. And women got the vote, I don't know, a few months later. I think it was 1918. It might have been 1918, it might have been closer to 1919. But as non-property owners, they wouldn't have been able to vote in previous years anyway, even if they hadn't been specifically excluded from the voting process, because most women lived in houses, even if the house was owned by the family, the house would have been in the name of the husband, and therefore the woman wouldn't have been able to vote in any case. So women got the vote in 1918 because of their obvious contribution to the war effort, and that was at the age of 30 they were allowed to vote, because there was such a disparity in genders at the time. So many men had been killed in the First World War that I don't know what the government thought the majority population of females was going to do with this power, but they decided that it would overbalance things too badly. So women of 21 didn't get the vote until 1928. So the ability to vote is fairly new, both for men as well as for women, and we shouldn't forget that. Now, in countries where women have very little economic power or social power, like in many countries in Africa, and in countries where women don't have the vote, like in Arabia and various other Arab countries, or where they may technically have the vote but they don't get a chance to exercise that vote, these are hardly countries that are models of progressive, and I'm using the word progressive in the correct sense, progressive values. These aren't countries where scientific inventions appear. These aren't countries where commerce works well, because in countries where one gender assumes all the power, and in most cases it's that men, it doesn't work. Things run into the buffers. If you look at 19th century novels, for instance, the ones that have the most, well, nearly all, the ones that have the most punch were written by women, because they were external observers of the society. Jane Austen, George Eliot, Mrs. Oh gosh, I've forgotten her name. Gaskell. They were the ones who were holding the mirror up to society, because they had a view that was not part of the boys' club that British society was at the time. You have to give women that voice. Now, there may be times when this voice is over-exercised. We'll get onto that in a minute. But you can't say that women should not have input, and the vote is input. Britain, America, Israel, these are all societies that are functioning well. However many complaints we have about them, they are functioning among the best in the world. And they are the ones where women have the most input. That can't be just a coincidence. So I think the big problem at the moment with idiots like that woman on Femininity So Fragile and many others of her ilk is that they feel they have too much power. And personally, I think it might have something to do with the gender imbalance. In previous years, men worked very dangerous jobs that killed them. They generally ran dangerous lives, even if they weren't working down the mines, and killed themselves through accidents of various sorts. there were many more men killed in acts of war or various conflicts of different sorts. And there were more women than men. And that is how nature seems to want it to be. Nature even kills off boys more frequently than girls. There are many more illnesses that kill males at a young age than females. There's got to be a reason for this. And I keep thinking of the London Zoo experiment. This happened in the 20s. What happened was the zoo had a population of male chimpanzees. They were all male, and then somebody thought it would be a good idea to introduce some females. Now, I don't know what the figures were, but it was a very small number of females. Let's say there were 20 males and they introduced 4 or 5 females. I don't know why they thought that was a good idea, but it caused chaos. Within a few days, the whole of the chimp society was in a situation of such vicious battle that the zoo authorities had to close that part of the zoo down because what was going on was so dreadful. The males were killing each other. They were killing the females in their frenzy. It was just going completely it was completely out of control, but it was out of control in a truly horrendous way. And that's when they realised that when there are too few females to too many males, society breaks down. Normal laws seem to just crumble. And that's what's happening in our society now. There are about the same number of females there always were, but there are more males, so the males are outnumbering the females. It was always, in births, live births, about 51% males to 49% females. But this, yeah, all right. But this was compensated for by the fact that the males tended to die off in infancy. And if they didn't die off in infancy, many of them died off in their teens. So now we have more males and things are going wrong. And there are many females who, listen, this is all subliminal. They realise this. And they realise they have a tremendous amount of power because they have their pick of men. I know there are some places where a lot of women are saying, oh, there aren't enough men around, you know. This is a certain area of society, but it's by no means across the board. And furthermore, there are many men who, again, subliminally realise they're going to have to fight for females, but they can't go and punch. They can't go and punch other men up fighting for women. So they do what I was talking about in another video. They come onto the women's side to try and inveigle themselves into the females that otherwise they wouldn't have a chance with. And you get people like Steve Shives and his type just, you know, going into this feminist nonsense, which I think somehow they think will get them more females. You know, that stuff about the sneaky fucker. I had discussed this on another video. So look, women don't have a corner on idiocy. And talking about whether women should have the vote or not, well, I may not be as intelligent as many men, but I am certainly more intelligent than a lot of others. And if we're going to talk about intelligence in voting, maybe that's one thing, but talking about female and male in voting, that's something else. It's not reasonable to pick on this particular subject. Well, that's it. That's it.